Hi there guys, welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy, doing something a bit different this week. I'm quite excited with this series. I think it's pretty interesting. I'm doing a franchise review for the last decade, and that includes me going through their drafts, over their general records, and breaking that down. Hopefully at the end of the week we'll have a really interesting breakdown of the entire league and where they stand. This episode will be focusing on the AFC North Cincinnati Bengals, who, like most of the AFC North, have been very consistent. We know who the exception is. That goes without saying. Browns. I'm going to say it anyway. So what I'm doing with these episodes, I'm breaking down the win and loss records over the last decade, the coaching changes, as well as those drafts. I'll get into more detail when I get to the segment on the draft picks as to how I am doing that. So, in the last decade, the Bengals have managed to amass a record of 83 wins, 74 losses and 3 ties. Definitely the most impressive aspect of that being the 3 ties. That is an absurd number. That's more than most franchises have had in their history. So good job there. Of course, Marvin Lewis has been the head coach for the entire time frame, second longest tenured coach in the league. He's done a pretty good job overall, I have to say, even if it's not translated to playoff wins. And they've had 6 playoff appearances in the last decade with 3 division titles. I think that's particularly impressive considering how competitive this division is. The Ravens and Steelers being 2 of the model franchises. So they've done well to stay competitive. Unfortunately, the playoff wins have not been there for them. So, got a reputation for being good at drafting. Let's see whether that is the case. So what I'm doing with this, going through the first 3 rounds, each pick the team has made, and evaluating whether that player was a solid pick, in which case the team will get a score of +1. A mediocre pick, which will be a flat 0, won't contribute to their score, or a bust, in which case they get a -1. And also value, which will be any pick from rounds 4 through 7 that goes on to be a solid contributor pretty much in any respect, and that will obtain the team a score of +1. What this has really taught me is it's really difficult for players drafted in the 4th round onward to make any kind of impact. I mean, it's been really enlightening in that regard. Of course, first rounders are being graded slightly more strictly, and that's the one time where I am taking into account where they're drafted to some extent also. So, the Bengals going to the 2007 draft. Their first round pick was Leon Hall, the cornerback, with the 18th overall pick. I've graded this a solid pick. I think he's been a pretty good player for the vast majority of his career. Certainly contributed to some success that team's had. Good overall player, solid pick, middle of the first round. This is an example of a very medium sort of solid but good pick. In the second round, they drafted Kenny Irons. Got to go down as a bust. The running back did nothing in this league. They also drafted Chindum Ndukwe, who made a Pro Bowl. That's solid value. So that is a good pick. So not a bad draft there. The 2008 draft, in the first round, they drafted Keith Rivers, the linebacker, with the 9th overall pick. He was a bust. Really didn't do anything in his career. It's particularly disappointing for a top 10 pick, of course. In the second, Chad Simpson, the wide receiver, most well known for flipping over Darrell Washington to score a touchdown. One of my favourite ever NFL plays. Damn, was that impressive. I've got this down as a medium pick. Combining these two, him and Pat Sims, who was the defensive tackle drafted in the 3rd, and sort of cancelling them out. I don't think either one was quite bad enough a pick to be a bust, but neither was good enough to be a really solid pick. Sims has been a solid kind of depth player, edging towards solid. Simpson edging towards bust. Cancelled them out because it's my list and I'll do that if I want. And I think that balances out personally. So there we go. The 2009 draft, with the first round pick and 6th overall, was Andre Smith, the Giant offensive tackle. This is a really tough one to grade because he's had some really good seasons where he's been a great right tackle, and he's also had others where he's been a bit of a liability, especially considering where he was drafted. I have settled on mediocre, which Might be wrong considering where he was drafted, but he has given, he's had a long career and he's played very well at times. Certainly one of the more difficult ones, but edging on mediocre there. I could understand if you want this one to be a bust, why you may do so. If you feel that way strongly, just take one away from this score for the Bengals at the end. Ray Mauluga in the second round, the linebacker, mediocre picks, played quite a long time, but I don't think he lived up to that draft status. I don't think he's been a particularly good player. That goes down as mediocre because he has had a long career. In the third round, Michael Johnson, the defensive end. That's a solid pick for a third rounder. Ends are pretty tough to get overall, and he's had a pretty solid career, even if he has sort of petered out in the last few years. Also in the third, tight end Chase Kaufman did nothing. He goes down as a bust. In the seventh, Clinton McDonald, the defensive tackle, currently for the Bucks, played for the Seahawks. He's had a really good career, particularly for a seventh rounder, still in the league. That definitely goes down as a value pick, even if most of what his best work came whilst he was with Seattle. In the 2010 draft, first round pick Jermaine Gresham, the tight end, at 21st overall. He's made 2 Pro Bowls. I did not know that. I'd say he was a bust, to be honest. First round tight end, expect more from him. Had a reasonable career, but for a first rounder, not particularly impressive in my opinion. In the second round, Carlos Dunlap. He's been a very solid player for them. That's a really, really good pick. That definitely goes down as a solid one. In the third, Jordan Shipley, the wide receiver. That's a bust. He did nothing with his career. Brandon Gee, the defensive back. It's another bust there. And then one of my favourite picks in the last decade, in the fourth round, Geno Atkins, the 2-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, and one of the best defensive tackles in the league to this day. That's just a great pick. That's, of course, going down as a solid pick. No complaints there. Then going on to the 11 draft. Now, at the end of the week, in my weekly review, I'm going to be doing my 10 favourite and my 10 least favourite draft classes. The 11 draft is a contender for the best just because of the importance it had to this franchise. So, in the first round with the 4th overall pick, they selected AJ Green. What a player. He's been absolutely fantastic. Multiple Pro Bowls, one of the top receivers in football. Can't argue with that being a solid pick. In the second round, Andy Dalton, got to be a solid pick. Solid starting quarterback, led the team to the playoffs a few times, made a couple of Pro Bowls in the process. Very important pick. Fantastic value, of course, to get starting quarterback at any point, basically. But yeah, he's been a good player for them. That's a solid. In the third round, Dante Mock, the linebacker, he's done nothing. I remember he's fast. That was about it. In the fourth, Clint Bowling, the guard. He's been a solid player. Great value in the fourth to get a player who's contributed as much as he did. So that's a very good draft. 2012 draft. This is an interesting one. A lot of picks made by the Bengals. This one may also be a contender for the best. So Dre Kirkpatrick at 17. That's a tough one. I thought he played quite well last season. Been pretty middling for most of his career. I've ended up giving it a solid based on last season, but I'm not enormously happy to do so. With the 27th pick of the first round, guard Kevin Zeitler's just signed with the Browns. Been a fantastic player in his time in the league. Unfortunately doesn't play for them anymore, but that has to go down as a solid pick. In the second, Devon Still, the defensive tackle, he was a bust. In the third, Mohamed Sanu. It's got to go down as a solid. Of course, no longer plying his trade in Cincinnati either. In the third, Brandon Thompson, defense tackle. He's done nothing. He's a bust. And then 2 players in the fifth, George Arloka, the safety, and Marvin Jones, the wide receiver who currently plays for the Lions. They've both been solid value players. So really, they came out of that draft with 4 decent starters. 5 if you include Kirkpatrick, who I've just given a solid based on last season. That's a great draft, and that's really good. 5 starters, incredible stuff. Even if they have let those players go, which I will discuss a bit later in this episode. The 2013 draft, first round pick Tyler Eifert at 21. Had some injuries, but he's been incredibly effective when healthy, one of the top receiving tight ends in the league. That goes down as a solid pick. In the second, Giovanni Bernard. That's another really good pick. May not be an every down back, but I think he's a dangerous weapon and a solid player. So that goes down as a solid. Magus Hunt, the giant defensive end in round 2. I thought that was a strange pick at the time, so I didn't think he fit, their scheme. He goes down as a bust. He's done nothing in his career. And Sean Williams in the third, the defensive back. He goes down as mediocre. He's been kind of depth, not really done too much, but I'm not going to criticise him too much. He is a third rounder after all. In the 2014 draft, we've got Alfonso Denard with the 24th pick. He's been a bust. Joe Mihill in the second. He's been solid. Not been as effective since sort of initially bursting on the scene, but I still think him and Bernard form a reasonable tandem. That goes down as a solid pick. Will Clark in the third. That goes down as a mediocre, maybe a bust, but I'm being a bit more generous with players from the last 3 drafts. Some of them, it's hard to say at this stage in time. There may not be enough tape. They may simply be depth players that we've not seen too much of. So he fits into that. AJ McCarron I'm putting in as a value pick simply because his value and stock seem to be quite high. He seems to be he's a good backup quarterback. To get that in the 5th, and I feel like they could probably trade him from probably more than that at this point if they wanted. So for that reason, I've put him down as a value pick for the franchise. The 2015 draft, Cedric Ogbuehi is the offense tackle at 21. I believe he's edging towards a bust, but not willing to say at this point in time. Similar with Jake Fisher, the second round offensive tackle. Tyler Croft at the tight end. Not seen anything of him at this point. Hard to say. Dawson in the third. I don't even believe he's still with the team. He's a bust. Not great there. And the 2016 draft, Jackson, the defensive back at 24. Steelers apparently wanted him. Bengals made a move, stole him from them. Haven't really seen too much of him at this point. Hard to say. Tyler Boyd in the second, I'm giving that a solid. I thought he showed enough last year to think he could develop into maybe not a number 2, but a solid contributor for this team. I'm giving that a solid. Maybe wrong there. I don't know. And in the third, Virgil. I'm not sure what position he plays. He's not done anything. Should have put more notes there. My apologies. So, figuring out at the end, this team has managed to come out with a score of +7. They've done a good job with value picks, having 6 of them, which is a pretty good job, including Geno Atkins. Combine that with a decent amount of solid picks, around about 9 or so. A couple of great ones in there. Done a good job, as I say, with the value stuff. There's been 11 or so busts. Again, a few of those are a bit iffy. I've sort of mixed it about a bit to give them a +7 because I think that's fair. In the first round, there's been 3 busts, 2 of which may be at this point. 2 really good picks, 2 solid picks, and 2 that one that I'm undecided on and one that's been mediocre. So that's not a great record in the first. That kind of has knocked their score a little bit. They've done a good job with the value, which is why it's as high as it is. As you'll see at the end of the week, +7 is a reasonable score. I think, as I say, the first round is what's really punished this team from having a better score there. In a couple of years, this could look like a really good decade of drafting if some of those players from the last couple of drafts have come through. If you hit plus double digits, that is a very good score in this system. So, solid overall job for the Bengals. I was expecting it to be a bit higher, as I say. They've got a reputation for being a good team at drafting and developing. The fact they've had as many value picks as they have, and a lot of their value picks have gone on to be good starters. Whilst I haven't made that distinction specifically for value picks, their value picks for the most part have been, good to Pro Bowl caliber players. Of course, Geno Atkins being the headliner among them, but Clint Bolling, another good example of a solid player that they've picked up afterwards. George Iloka, these are decent players. Marvin Jones. Some of the value picks here are simply really good depth or backups. So they've done a great job there, and that's really, I think, allowed this team to be as successful as it has. Of course, a couple of really important drafts, the 11 and 12, I think they gave them a good foundation to have the level of success they did since that, over that time frame. Unfortunately, a lot of those players leaving in the last 2 seasons, I think, has hurt them, and the last couple of drafts are yet to come through for them in replacing those players. So let me know what you guys think. Are you enjoying this series so far? I think it's really informative doing the research. I think I've learned a lot. It's really demonstrated to me how difficult the draft process is. Do you agree with me on any of these? Have been overly harsh, overly generous? I know this one's got a couple that are a bit more iffy, in my opinion. I don't feel so great about what I've ended up on, but at the end of the day, this has been a reasonable team. I think this score reflects that. Let me know what you think, and drop by in the comments on the Twitter, the Facebook page for Cover Zero. Do my best to get back to everyone who does so. Check out the Patreon as well. That would be thoroughly appreciated. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you very much for your time. Check out more of my videos if you enjoyed this one, and go Bucks.